right. Let me just a few housekeeping things. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can feel free to use the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature, which I believe is down at the bottom of your screen under reactions. And I'll help our presenters keep an eye on that, but you know, they may call, but if I chime in, no, that's why, that I'm just helping keep an eye on things. Sorry, still admitting folks from the waiting room. So I wanted to just take a brief moment to introduce our presenters. Dr. Tonya Lambert Delp is the Associate Director of Psychological Services, and Shonnet Brand is the Associate Director of School-Based Services at the Virginia Institute of Autism. They both work in the outpatient department there and have extensive experience, which they're going to share with us today, in training and working with families impacted by autism. So I will turn it over to y'all. I will mute myself, but thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise with us.
All right, thank you so much, Kate, and thanks for having us. We are excited to be here and know that the majority of our folks are from this area, but we don't want to leave some of you guys out that might be outside of the Charlottesville kind of catchment area. So I will, I'm just gonna do a quick introduction about, thank you. I don't have to introduce Tonya and me, so that's great. We've both been at VIA for about 8 years in our outpatient department. And so what that means at VIA is that we have kind of 3 core programs. And our Charlottesville VIA, we are just merging with Blue Ridge Autism Center, St. Vincent's Home, Katie's Place. They have like 3 different names down in Lynchburg, Lexington, Roanoke, and that kind of area. So today we're going to talk about, we're just getting to know those folks. So we're excited to merge with them, but I'm going to talk to you more about the services that we have in Charlottesville through VIA. So we have our day program, which our day school, which most people think of when they think of VIA, they think of our day school because it's been around the longest, and that serves school age kids ages 5 to 21, and from all over, lots of different school divisions refer their students to us. We also have an adult program, which is fairly new. We have a nice new building for them, which is great, where they can practice daily living and job skills. We have a Viable Ventures program for them, a company where they make candles and lots of fun things to sell to support their program. And then the third kind of department that we have, program that we have at VIA is our outpatient, which is where Tonya and I are housed. And in our outpatient department, we also serve the lifespan. So we provide psychological services, which is what Tonya oversees. She'll do some, her folks do some individual therapy, parent training, some social skills groups, assessments, evaluations, all that kind of fun stuff for people who are not necessarily on the autism, almost said spectrum, and I'm trying not to use spectrum, but they might not have an autism diagnosis. So that's something that we're really trying to tell folks about as well. I know today we're going to be talking about autism, but we also serve folks who are not necessarily diagnosed with autism. The other program, the second program we have in our outpatient is our center-based ABA, which we'll talk a little bit about ABA a little bit later. So these kiddos are early intervention kiddos. We bring them into our clinic and we get them ready. We build on their core deficits and get them ready for school, and lay the foundation and the groundwork for to help with their trajectory. And then we have the last program that we have is my school-based services. So I have a team of folks who go into public schools and some private schools, and we help lots of different kinds of students and teachers and paraprofessionals and administrators to help students be successful in public school settings. So yeah, so like Kate said, we welcome your questions throughout. Please just raise your hand, and we have built in some natural kind of break times to chat as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about what is autism and how is it diagnosed? How do we interact with individuals with autism? Because I know that that's sometimes something that people are wondering about. And then what services are recommended, especially for you guys in your roles. We thought that those were kind of the key areas to hit for you all. So we know that autism is a developmental disorder that affects the functioning of the brain. So it is a neurological disorder. You know, you guys, I'm sure have heard, which is why we're doing this training today, that it is very prevalent. You know, I've been in the field for a couple of decades now. And I remember when I first started, it was like 1 in 2,500, and now it's 1 in 44 children are diagnosed. We also know that boys are more likely than girls. 44% have average to above average cognitive abilities, which I think is something that maybe we don't necessarily know, or we kind of overlook because they might have some other challenges of communication, social, and so we kind of make assumptions about their cognitive abilities, but 44% are average or above average, which also makes it really challenging to work with them. It affects all ethnic and socioeconomic groups. You know, some of our ethnic groups just are not able to access services early enough. So that number has grown tremendously in the past 5 to 10 years as well. Currently, there's no way to be medically detected, and there is no cure. As much as we would like there to be, there is no cure at this point, but we have lots of great treatments and therapies that we'll talk about later. So even though it is detected reliably by age 2, so we do have assessments and evaluations, especially Tonya and her team do that at VIA, that we can diagnose as early as 2. But most occur after age 4. So it's getting better. It was 6 and then it was 5 and now it's age 4. So we're going in the right direction, but because we know how successful early intervention is, obviously we would like for those numbers to keep going down and get them diagnosed as early as possible. Girls are likely to be diagnosed later than boys due to what we call masking. So typically girls, you know, and obviously these are generalizations about boys and girls, but they exhibit some behaviors that are just not as apparent, and that they might not be as open about some of the social issues that they might be having. So a lot of times they're diagnosed later. Minority groups tend to be diagnosed later and less often as well. Again, I think a lot of it is because they are just, you know, don't have as much access. And so we are definitely working on that, especially at VIA. Parents who have a child with autism are 2 to 18% more likely to have another child with autism. So we have also seen that at VIA where, you know, parents are, now that if they have an older child, now they know what to look for. And so they're, you know, getting their kids in a little bit earlier if they have concerns. So obviously, given all of the autism facts, it impacts families tremendously, which is what you all, I'm sure, are seeing as well. The cost of services is astronomical, even if they do have insurance that covers ABA treatments or maybe some family therapy or individual therapy. There's still co-pays and there's still limitations. So there's just a tremendous high cost of services, even if they have insurance, and that's not counting, you know, if they need to be on a gluten-free diet, and gluten-free foods are more expensive. just, or if they need a alternative communication device, they need an iPad to communicate, those can get pretty pricey. We also know that mothers tend to serve as case managers and advocates, so they're less likely to work outside of the home, and they're also less likely to work full time. So it's just a tremendous, it's a tremendous task for caregivers, especially mothers, to manage, to be able to understand the IEP process and the waiver process and all of that. It's very time consuming while they're trying to care for their child who they also can't find reliable childcare for. So that's also a huge barrier that we try to help families with. And the data is varied on this, but we, in terms of, so we know it's stressful, right? But there's some data that vary in terms of how much more stressful it is for families with a child diagnosed with autism versus families who have a child diagnosed with, let's say, an intellectual disability or another mental health disability. That's also very stressful. But the stress never goes away. Even if families get services or get an early diagnosis, the stress is still there as they reach various milestones and work their way up through the lifespan. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Tonya.
Yeah. So essentially, with what Shonnet was just sharing there, sort of laying the scene, right, of the types of individuals that you might be interacting with, and hopefully taking into account some of the stressors that they are being presented with. Access to services, like Shonnet mentioned, being one of them. I think we are very lucky in the Albemarle, Charlottesville area to have what for our state is actually a lot of resources, but it can still feel very much like not enough resources to a lot of the families in the area. So, and thinking outside of this area, even fewer resources. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk more just about what autism spectrum disorder looks like. And as Shonnet mentioned earlier, she said she was trying not to use the term autism spectrum disorder. It is still the diagnostic label. So it is still the thing. But I think as a field, psychology, medical practice, what we're seeing is trying to use person first language, but also person preferred language. So there's been, for the longest time, it's not a person with autism, it's a person diagnosed with autism. It's not an autistic person, right? But what we're seeing now is that some people actually prefer to be referred to as an autistic person. And so to the extent possible, I think taking into account those individual preferences of how they identify with their diagnosis, again, right, it's a lifelong diagnosis. They have to embrace it however they best feel it fits them, and respecting that. But I am going to call it autism spectrum disorder because that is what my diagnostic criteria says it is. So this is the, if you looked it up on the internet, right, characterized by serious impairments in social interaction and communication and by unusual behaviors and interests. So when we are looking at an individual and trying to answer the question of do they meet criteria for autism, they have to have both social interaction deficits and unusual behavior and interest. One thing that I will say is that when I say social interaction deficits, that doesn't mean they're not interested in interacting with people. It just means that they're not picking up on sort of the typical social cues, right? So they might be very, very social, but they have no stranger danger, or they're having really difficult time engaging in a conversation. So it doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means that there's deficits in some way. So a person who has an autism spectrum disorder may exhibit some of these things. I'm going to go through a few slides like this, but what I really want to point out is the word might. They might have these traits. They might have one of them, they might have a few of them, they may have none of them. Because again, it looks so very different from person to person. So difficulty establishing or maintaining peer relationships with young kids. This is something as simple as, can they play appropriately on the playground, right? Can they share as expected for their age? And as kids and adolescents grow older, having a more pure social relationship, like what we think about with conversations and just kind of hanging out and having fun. Do they show a lack of facial expression, gestures, and nonverbal cues? I think a lot of us don't realize how often we are using these when we are talking to other people, and still until you start talking about it, right? And then you're like, oh my gosh, I use my hands or I use my face the whole time when I'm talking. And what we might see with a person with autism is they can use gestures, they can use facial expressions, but putting it together with their vocal language is sometimes more difficult. Response to name is a pretty common one that people talk about or hear about. Avoiding eye contact, also pretty common. I've also just on the opposite end of that again, having really intense eye contact, right? Like someone told me I needed to do this, so now I'm doing it, right? But it doesn't feel natural. Pointing to objects or not pointing to objects or things of interest, right? So what do we all do whenever we're talking to a little kid, right? It's, look over there, look at that thing. So they're either not following a point or they are not pointing to get your attention to look at something with them. And like I said, may seem uninterested in people or just having trouble initiating and engaging with people. Some common communication deficits that we might see, again, I think a lot of people think of individuals with autism as being nonverbal or non-speaking. So while that may be true of some, that is definitely not true of all. And we wanted to make this note here as well of just because an individual may not be able to communicate verbally with you, does not mean that they cannot understand what you are saying to them. And it does not mean that they don't have a desire to communicate. And that they might be able to communicate in some other way. That's where resources and services are very important to try to determine those things. They may use language repetitively, saying the same thing over and over again, or using the same phrase over and over again in a way that doesn't feel natural. Interpreting language literally. So a lot of their common phrases that we might say, they might think that you literally mean it's raining cats and dogs. Or if you say, just give me a minute, right? They're sitting there with their timer going, okay, it's been a minute. Now it's time for us to do that thing. And then again, on the other end of these sort of skills, they may have a really extensive vocabulary. Like Shonnet said, 44% of individuals are average or above average in their IQ or their cognitive abilities. I've worked with kids before who have a better vocabulary than I do, but they might only want to talk about specific things, or they may not be able to have a like real back and forth conversation. Some individuals with autism have behavioral challenges. Again, this is not a rule. This is a common thing, but it is not a rule. So there may be repetitive patterns of behavior. You might see them rocking, or might be engaging in some like hand mannerisms or finger mannerisms. They may be really interested in like one or a few specific topics. And that doesn't mean that because they're interested in airplanes when they are 4, that they are only going to be interested in airplanes for the rest of their life, right? Those interests might change. Strict adherence to routines or rituals, having a really difficult time when things change suddenly, might even be something like mom got a haircut, right? Oh my goodness, that might set them off. And I already talked about that. And then you may see some sensory differences. What I like to point out is that we all have sensory differences. We all have specific ways that we like to be touched or don't like to be touched, certain sounds that might really just get your gears and drive you crazy. but this is impacting them to a point where they're not able to sit in a classroom, or they're not able to go to the store because it's too loud. The fire drills at school, right? Like really set them off. Wearing socks really sets them off, right? So it could be being overly sensitive to certain sensations, or being underly sensitive. So they're seeking more of that sensation. Other characteristics that may be present but are not considered as part of the diagnosis. So these are perhaps feeding into some comorbid diagnoses that I'm going to get to. There's a lot of research coming out about some of these, with like sort of differences in brain development, differences in GI development that we see commonly with individuals with autism. So difficulties with imitation, which is vastly important for learning skills when we're itty bitty. Difficulties with executive functioning. So that's attention, memory, organization, planning. You all use it every single day, and you have the leisure of not having to think about it. Weight and nutritional concerns. Other features, abnormal reactions, really extreme moods. Some individuals may engage in some tantrum or aggressive behavior, really restricted diets, or eating things that are not food, sleeping difficulties, typically undersleeping, not getting enough sleep, or some dysregulation in their sleep schedule is what we see more often. Lack of awareness to danger, safety, chronic GI difficulties, really delayed toileting, and self-injurious behavior. Individuals who are diagnosed with autism are commonly also diagnosed with ADHD, and are more likely to be diagnosed with mood disorders as well, anxiety and depression being the primary ones, particularly, again, for those individuals who are average to above average, and who might notice some of the differences. Those mood disorders are really prevalent. A third of individuals with autism also have a seizure disorder of some sort. They may grow out of it, they may not. And schizophrenia is more common as well. And there's a lot of hypotheses about why that might be. But yeah, I'm going to pause there if there are any questions just about what autism is and what it looks like before I pass it back to Shonnet. And then there's something in the chat, so let me look here. So someone asked, what do I think of Attorney Wu as helpful or not helpful for public understanding of autism? I have to say, I haven't seen that. So I am not familiar with it, and I will have to check it out. I will say that most things that I've seen that have some portrayal of autism portray what it might look like for one person with autism, but that's about as far as it goes. Any other questions before Shonnet takes it back over?
Looks like you have one more question in the chat.
Yeah, I think it's more of a comment, but yeah, talking about the spectrum is truly huge. 100%. It is vast, and we are learning more and more about it. So I think that my hope is that we are starting to better appreciate and also serve these individuals at all varying levels, for sure. All right, go ahead, Shonnet.
So I see the question about causes. So I'll go back to that, or Tonya might be able to, or do you want to explain more now, Tonya?
I can jump in real quick. Yeah. So I'll go back so we don't get distracted by new words on the screen. So there is no identified cause at this point. A lot of the research out there is showing that it is some mix of environmental and genetics. We haven't pinpointed a specific gene. It is more likely a cluster of genes that make a person more likely to develop autism spectrum disorder. But, like Shonnet mentioned with siblings, it is clear that there is some genetic component to it. A parent who has a child is more likely that child will have autism. If there's one child in the family who has autism, it is more likely that there will be another child in the family who has autism. And what I will say to that is they might both have autism and have very, very different skill sets, right? So it's not that it presents in the same way. And what we do know from a multitude of literature at this point is that it's not vaccines, it's not any chemicals in our water, or our food, or any one thing like that. That seems to be a cause of autism. And so we're still figuring it out. And then with regards to the prevalency, I think there's a lot of different reasons, like you said there, Karen. One of them being that we're understanding it more, we're identifying it earlier. And a lot of these individuals who are average to above average intelligence, who might have social difficulties, but who, kind of past generations, we would have just been like, they're just kind of a loner. They like to be to themselves, or just a little weird, or whatever kinds of things we would have said in the past, right? Those people are now being diagnosed as individuals who have autism, and are expressing like, I didn't want to be alone, right? Like this was actually really hard, or I chose to be alone because no one else understood me and I didn't know how to interact with other people. So a lot of this learning that we have really gotten from the autistic community itself, I think is helping us to better identify individuals.
Okay, so given that we are, better at recognizing the needs, and at various and really at various stages, something that we are really trying to make sure that folks know, especially people in your positions, and people in the schools, teachers in middle school, teachers in upper elementary, even certainly high school, is that we have to be starting to think about these individuals as adults early on, because the services just drop off. So that's what we call the autism cliff. So it's great that a lot of our kiddos are getting diagnosed earlier and they're getting services earlier, because there are a lot of services. However, those services come to a screeching halt, really, when they are reach adulthood. So, schools are starting to think about transition, even, earlier than 14 now. And so we encourage families too, to be thinking about as early as 5, to be thinking about getting on waiver wait lists, because they're long and they're lengthy. You really do have to start thinking about that. We used to tell parents to start thinking about, it's and obviously they are not fun conversations, and we don't like to have those conversations, but at least just to start thinking about, if something happens to one of the caregivers, who else is going to, step in, and the impacts that it has on siblings, who might be neurotypical siblings, just a myriad of things, because it's our adult program, as we serve adults. The wait list is very long, because it's a huge point time in our development, right? So like 21 to whatever. So it's just impossible to be able to serve all of these folks with really very few resources. It's really sad, and we're trying to fight legislation as much as we can to advocate for those folks. And we have a ton of adults on the spectrum who are advocating for themselves as well, because they have all these services, and bam, just because they turn 21 or 22 doesn't mean they automatically are better, right, or cured. So and some of the scary statistics are that they might not receive any health care for years, More than half are likely to remain unemployed and unenrolled in higher education. So half, if even folks who have, gotten their high school diploma, they've made it through, and they're dropping out of school, half of them, because it's just really hard to find, say, a job coach to help you keep your employment, or even a college coach to help you through all of the stressors that neurotypical college students go through. If they are employed, they're more likely to be underemployed and live below the poverty level. So, we're not paying these folks certainly enough money, and that might be because they can't hold a regular schedule. So they can't work as many hours. Maybe it's, the stress is too much for them, or they're not advocating for themselves. Let me just look at the chat really quick.
The question was, why no healthcare?
So,
A lot of reasons.
yeah, I mean, in general, adults, when, after 26, after you get off your parents' health insurance, so they might not have a full-time job that allows them to get health insurance. They might not know how to advocate to find alternatives to a healthcare insurance that, through their employer. There's just not a lot of options for health insurance if you're not a full-time employee. There really just aren't.
It's also a lot of barriers to just accessing medical health care. A lot of individuals with autism do not have a driver's license, so getting themselves to an appointment is a barrier. Right, navigating a bus system or something like that could be very difficult for individuals who have, poor attention or poor ability to sort of plan out a route, which goes with that executive functioning piece. So there's a lot of potential barriers for accessing healthcare, as well as a job. Right, the driver's license and public transit are also part of that as well.
Yeah, and just navigating our healthcare system in general. Like, I don't know about you guys, but it's difficult. It's difficult for all of us. It's not easy. And getting those pieces of mail getting those pieces of mail, and you're like, what is this? What is the EOB? It's especially if you don't have a good advocate to help you, and it's hard to, again, access those resources, and it's just this kind of spiral. It's also a good idea. May some individuals with an autism diagnosis qualify for a disability? Yes, absolutely. They may qualify for disability. So, that's why we have great folks like you who can help them access that. It's just a good idea to begin thinking and planning for guardianship needs. That, like I said earlier, it's not a fun conversation to have, but we do have them, and we do have folks. We have a really fantastic family services navigator at VIA, and she'll help parents, caregivers, guardians talk about setting up trusts for their adult, or, again, we have some information at the end that we're going to talk about, give you guys some information on the waivers and things like that. Okay, and then the one thing to keep in mind is that if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism, right? Like at this point, I've worked with thousands and thousands of people, and certainly not one of them are the same. So they're all different. They all and they change, right? I mean, we see kids, we might have them for early intervention, and we're like, woohoo, look at all these gains they've made. They're talking, they're toilet trained. This is awesome. They go off to school. Then they turn 13, and the parents are like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And they've got this whole new slew of challenges. And so, we wrap them back up, and we try to, support them. So things change over time. When we talk about the spectrum at VIA, we're really trying to change that conversation a little bit. And even though that is the official DSM diagnosis, that we like to think of individuals as a constellation. So all of us have our own constellation of brighter stars and dimmer stars and closer stars and further stars and all these different constellations that make every single one of us unique. So, keeping in mind that you want to find the strengths in every single person with autism, because there are plenty of strengths that these individuals have. We often focus on the challenges because they are the ones that, get us the referral or that get them the resources and the services. But they have amazing, amazing strengths as well. And your best option is to, in combating those challenges, oftentimes is to build on their strengths. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Tonya.
Okay, so Karen, this also, I can answer your other question. And then are there any statistics which show how many children, young adults are in foster care? Oh, there are, but I don't remember them right now. It is, it's a larger proportion than I feel like it should be.
We
yes,
had
there's
that in
a
another
large
training we did.
Yes, we took it out. Yeah, there's a large proportion of individuals with autism in foster care for sure. And some of those individuals may not even become diagnosed until they're in foster care, right? And so then you have a foster parent who took in this, little darling, and is now struggling with all these challenges and struggling to understand what does it mean for this child to have autism. But yeah, that is definitely true. So the other question that was asked is, are there any negative impacts of giving someone an autism diagnosis? So just real quick, so diagnosis can either be made by a medical doctor or by a licensed clinical psychologist. So like Shonnet mentioned, we do diagnose individuals here at VIA. I find that most of the just regular pediatricians in the area will not diagnose. They might do a sort of provisional diagnosis, but then they're going to make a referral to get the official diagnosis. Developmental pediatricians will often diagnose as well. And those diagnoses are what are required in order to access disability, Medicaid waivers, a lot of the services that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Schools may also evaluate a child, and they may find a child to meet criteria for autism as is specified by special education law, but that doesn't give them a ticket to anything other than special education, which is also wonderful. But anything outside of the school, they cannot access without a medical diagnosis. This question comes up a lot, pretty often with especially teens who are average to above average with cognitive abilities of this negative impact. One that I've seen parents become upset about in the past in particular is that it used to be that our military would not allow an individual with ADHD or autism to enlist. That is no longer the case. At least it's no longer a blanket rule. So it is determined by the impact of the diagnosis. Right, like, do we want someone in the Air Force flying high-speed jets who has really significant executive functioning deficits? Probably not. But does that mean that they can't be in the military at all? No. So that used to be a big one that a lot of parents would not want the diagnosis on the record for. In other areas of life, it's really up to the individual to share if they have that diagnosis, right? If they go to a university, it's up to them to share. If they go to a job interview, it's up to them to share that information. So it's not public knowledge. It doesn't impact an insurance carrying you on its plan, right? And access to services that way. That is illegal now. So they should not be able to prohibit you access to insurance or medical coverage because you are diagnosed with autism. I think for a lot of teens, what I more so see is this means I'm different, or this means I'm not as good as my peer, right? So it's a lot of that self-esteem piece, and that's where more of the anxiety, depression, and need for therapy and understanding that diagnosis. And like, it doesn't mean that you're not good at right? It means you're good at a very different set of skills like the rest of us. And, you know, I work with a lot of families on pointing out that a lot of creative thinkers are individuals with autism. Albert Einstein, I think we're all in agreement at this point that like probably was an individual with autism. And so it does not mean that you are less, it just means that your thinking is different, and different is not bad. So let me just make sure I'm not missing anything before I move on here. This is still me, yes. So obviously early detection is really what we would hope for, primarily because early intervention is shown to have the greatest impact for an individual with autism in increasing their communication skills, their social skills, learning those early on, so you're not trying to catch up so much later in life. Again, most individuals, not all individuals with autism, respond really well to highly structured specialized programs, a lot of repetition, a lot of just really consistent treatment. And there's a lot out there. If you did a Google search for treatments for autism, you're going to find, I think we're up to like over 500 that you might find. And the majority of them do not have any research to support them. And it is just, you know, literally selling people just potions almost. It's robbery. And these parents and individuals who have people in their care are just willing to try anything to help their children or their teens. So the primary research-based treatment for autism is an intensive structured teaching that is called applied behavior analysis, or ABA is what most people refer to it as. It has come to be sort of a little bit of a dirty word in the world of autism, and we can talk about that as well. But ABA can be used for a variety of different things. I can put all of this into one big, you know, sentence of decrease behaviors that are kind of getting in the way, right? So they're causing harm to the individual or to others, or teaching skills that are going to increase their ability to function independently. That is the primary goal of applied behavior analysis. And to also teach individuals that work with them how to continue that growth. Like I said, it's become a little bit of a dirty word, because in the past, there have been ABA providers. I'm not going to say this is a thing that has happened for no reason, but there have been ABA providers who have said, you must look people in the eye, you must sit in a chair, right? You have to follow these very strict social rules, social norms that we have within our society. And again, we've learned from a lot of individuals who have autism that is traumatic for them. It is really difficult. And it's perceived as us trying to make them fit the mold, right? And like that shouldn't be the goal of what we are doing. Again, we shouldn't making these individuals feel like they're less because of a diagnosis that they have and that they can't change. And a lot of them would actually say they don't want to change. They love it. You know, a lot of people with autism find a way to embrace everything that's, you know, creative and great about them. So what we should be aiming for as ABA providers is to change and to teach behaviors that are meaningful to that person and to that family, right? So just because a kid might do this a lot, I don't care, as long as they can like have a conversation and they can get their work done at school and they can, you know, whatever it is that they want to do. If you want to ride a bicycle, can't be doing this, right? We're going to have to stop that for a little while so we can put those hands on the handlebars. But I'm not going to make them stop that behavior just because I want to, right? That's not a good reason to make it stop. So it's not a one size fits all approach. It's really supposed to be individualized and compassionate and thinking about the setting that person is in and the setting that person wants to be in, and what's going to be meaningful for them. So some other services, because ABA is not the only thing. So just real quick, so Jane asked, is it available in public schools? In Albemarle County, there are BCBAs, Board Certified Behavior Analysts in the schools. Shonnet can talk more about that, but that varies from school district to school district. And is it available internationally? Kind of. So our board that oversees certifications recently, I am not sure what the cause of it was, but they recently made a change that individuals outside of the United States and Canada cannot be certified. You can come to the United States and get your training and do a program, and then you can get certified in the US and you can go back to your home country. I know a person right now in Korea who's trying to pursue that and taking a behavior analysis to Korea. It's kind of similar in some ways to what it is in the United States. There are pockets of the globe where you can find ABA providers, but it is not the norm outside of sort of Western culture, if you will. But yeah, so other services that might be recommended: speech. Again, communication deficits, we need to make sure that they are learning how to communicate effectively, whether that be verbally or some other means. OT, a lot of our individuals have core weaknesses, which impact them in a lot of ways, even writing. You don't think about it again, because you don't have to, but your core is really used for everything that you do all day long. So thank your abs, even if you can't see them, because I can't see mine. And social skills. So social skills groups might be useful. Developmental pediatrics, just again, to better understand how development is different in an individual with autism versus a neurotypical peer. School-based services, and just down here at the bottom, again, some of these folks who are more cognitively similar to their peers, more verbally similar to their peers, really have a distaste for ABA, even though we might use some behavior analytic strategies in these other methods. But they're typically finding more impact from something to help deal with the mood symptoms that they're experiencing related to their autism versus needing to work on communication or daily living skills. Shonnet, do you want to say something really quick about school services before we move on? And I'm really sorry, can we skip the video because we're tight on time?
I was going to say that, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Like Tonya said, so we work in various school divisions in the area. We work in Greene, Nelson, Charlottesville, Albemarle, just various school divisions. And most school divisions at this point do have behavior specialists. They might not be a board certified behavior analyst, but they are considered a behavior specialist. It doesn't mean that necessarily that they're using applied behavior analysis in schools, but there are lots of certificates and trainings now that certainly we offer, but other folks are offering too, to help schools access that and be able to do it in a way that is just functional for school settings, and not your typical kind of sit down at the table, do discrete trial with a kid, hand them an M&M. It's more like this is how we do it, to use the principles so that they can be effective in this least restrictive environment. Okay, so then a question that had come up that Kate wanted us to be able to address with you guys is how to interact, given the huge variety of learners, individuals that we have that have autism. So clearly it depends, but if it's your number one go-to with any child, right? But also keep in mind that this does change depending on function level and age and whatever, but rapport building and relationship strengthening are your number one priorities with individuals with autism. They have trust issues. They might have gone through a lot of different teachers by now, or a lot of different family members. And so rapport building and relationship strengthening are your number one priorities. Again, that what we might think of them as being not interested in interacting because they can't show the typical social cues is absolutely not true at all. So know their likes and dislikes. Don't make assumptions. And know their strengths and deficits, their deficits and strengths, I should say, in social and communication. Visual supports are very helpful. Use clear, concise directions, pausing, not throwing out too many directions and expect an answer right away. Some of these things I'm like, this is just what a typical teenager responds to. So, keep that in mind too, that, again, that like executive functioning, prefrontal cortex, like all of that stuff kind of makes a difference the older that they get. So we're not going to watch this video. I know Tonya is really sad because she doesn't like this video, but if you could go to the next slide, Tonya, we are going to talk about.
Can I just say something really quick?
Yeah, sure.
I was just going to say, go back to the eye contact avoidance, that I think things like that are really important for individuals with autism when you're, meeting with them and working with them is not to force the eye contact, not to force the tell them thank you, tell them goodbye. Yes, we want them to do those things, but recognizing that that's something we can work on. That's something we can build towards. It's not something that comes easily for a lot of individuals with autism, and forcing that can burn that bridge before you've even started. And like Shonnet said, that rapport building and relationship strengthening. I know more about Roblox and Minecraft and Pokemon than I ever wanted to know in my entire life. And I care nothing about any of those things. But if I didn't make an effort, right, then my kids are just gonna be like, oh, this lady again, who, right, is not interested in anything that I'm interested in. It's really important to make that effort. Even if you just focus on one character and learn a few facts, right? That's something for them.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we when we're teaching caregivers, or even honestly, when we're just teaching new therapists and new teachers or paraprofessionals to work with individuals, is we use this. I think it's really, I love a good acronym. So for me, it's really helpful to remember when I'm getting to know somebody on the spectrum, or anybody really, to be honest, but that these use of pride skills. So pride stands for praise, reflection, imitation, description, and enthusiasm. And this comes out of parent-child interaction therapy. Oh, sorry, that's Tonya saying that. I was like, wait, someone else knows it. So thinking about, what you do when children are babies, what you do when they're young children, but also, again, like Tonya said, what we do, how we interact with someone who is a teenager or an adult. So, praising appropriate behaviors, obviously if they're young, that could look like, great job sitting on your bottom. But if they're older, it could just be like, hey man, thanks for the high five. That's a really appropriate social interaction. I'm going to make sure that I, give it to you, or maybe I won't even say anything. I'll just give you a high five. Reflection. So, this is, saying back appropriate talk. We do have some individuals that we work with in the school who like to use not school friendly language. And so, we're not going to necessarily, punish them for using that language. We're just going to reflect on positive behavior that they do have, because if you point out the really strong language, then chances are they're going to do it again. So we're going to make sure that we reflect on appropriate talk, using an inside voice and all of those fun things. So imitate appropriate play. So for little kids, this could look like you're just playing with trains and they go one way with the train, and so you go one way with the train. The important part here is that when you're building relationships and establishing rapport, that as adults, our impulse is to be like the teacher and to be giving demands and to be showing them and telling them what to do. these things that we're talking about, these pride skills, help us let the child lead. And then therefore we're going to get a ton more out of them because they're like, wow, this person's really interested in me. And this person really cares about what I'm doing. So imitate appropriate play for a little kid could look like train play, whatever. In an older kid, it could look like you're just sitting down and you're watching a YouTube video with them and you're talking about, whoa, look at that. Whoa, what did they just say? Or what just happened? Or sorry, not supposed to ask questions either. That's really hard to not ask questions. That, oh my gosh, that car just went super fast. I wonder where that, I was watching car videos the other day with a kid and I could not have been less interested in these car videos, but the kid never knew it because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, well, look at that explosion. That's crazy. Describing appropriate behavior. So what they're doing, if they're on their iPad, you could be like, wow, I really like how you're sharing your iPad with me. Thanks so much for, sitting quietly or, and then certainly enthusiasm. The enthusiasm part, you've got to be careful with because some individuals really in general in life, but especially with autism, they might not like a huge display of enthusiasm. I have to calm myself down when I'm with certain students. They might not like the big, like, oh my gosh, wow, this is so great. They might just be like, they might like the cool man, way to go, or, a thumbs up. Again, when you're trying to establish rapport and strengthen your relationship, we try to ignore inappropriate behavior. We try to avoid giving demands. I mean, obviously demands have to come at some point, but when you're really, this isn't just in the beginning either, right? Like we have relationships with these kids and sometimes you find yourself having to, if they've had something really difficult come up at home or at school, trying to get that out of them, you have to go back to these skills. So like, just be interested in what they're doing. And, so the question part is because, not that I'm saying don't ever ask questions, but certainly when you're trying, every time you ask a question, it puts you back in the lead. So when you're trying to establish rapport and strengthen your relationships, adults, we tend to just ask so many questions. And so really what you want to keep in mind is this kind of ratio of more positives to every negative, and not that your question is going to be a negative, but it just kind of puts you back in the lead and can make them feel like you're, because we're just trying to teach them all the time. And I find I do this with students, I do this with my kid, I do this with my husband, and it automatically shifts the focus of what you're really trying to do. And then, the example there they have is like, instead of saying, like you just want to reflect the appropriate talk, like I have 3 cars and yeah, you have 3 cars. And our inclination would be to be like, yeah, okay, what comes after 3? 4. And if they don't know the answer to that, then you've just sort of lost that headway that you made. And obviously avoid criticizing. So those are just some kind of, I pull that out because I just think it's it's just a nice way to remember to kind of catch yourself and check yourself when you're interacting with individuals across the lifespan. Obviously it'll look different depending on their level of functioning, but it's just a nice way to remember, how to interact with folks and to not be putting them in a position where they might not want to open up to you as much. I think are we ending at 1, Kate? Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to say too, I think, a lot of times this comes up for me of I'm asking a teen. I work with a lot of our teens that are really verbal, very capable of accessing general education type curriculum. And, I might be asking questions to find out like how they feel about something, or if they would like to try, a service or something else that's being offered. And I have to stop myself a lot because a lot of times, while they're very capable in a lot of ways, it's too abstract. And they may not even be able to answer that question because they haven't experienced it yet. And so it can be really hard to put themselves in that
those shoes and in that perspective. And so a lot of times it might be like, okay, well, let's try this. And then we could talk about it, talk about if you liked it or not, how you felt about it. And approaching it that way. We have these other slides about waivers in the state of Virginia. We will share these slides with you all so that you have them. We weren't going to go over them in full anyways, because it's too much. So I will make a PDF of these slides. And then I also have just a 1-pager of service providers in the area that we typically refer to. And I will share those. I'll send those to Kate so that she can distribute them to you all as well. If there are any questions, we can linger for just a few minutes, but I also want to be mindful of everyone else's time if you do need to go.
Yeah, I think if anybody wants to come off mute, if you have questions you want to ask, but if folks need to go, we certainly understand. But if anybody has any questions, chime on in.
And we're also happy to share contact information if anybody has questions that come up later and you want to shoot a question our way. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you all for being interested in our services and in individuals with autism and just, better understanding them and meeting their needs.
Yeah.
I think that's the goal.
Thanks. This was great. I think particularly those charts were just so helpful and really thought-provoking, and kind of the way we interact. I mean, even just with my own kids, thinking about that is just 100%. Really wonderful. So thank you so much. And I'll go ahead and end it unless I see anybody has any questions. All right. Well, thanks again, y'all, for helping out. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time, and thanks for sharing the slides and other stuff afterwards. That's really.
I'll send that to you right now, Kate, or else I will forget.
I hear that. All right. Take care, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.